Hello friends, it's Kayla. Welcome back to my channel. Once again this year we're going to be reading the horror nominees in the Goodreads Choice Awards. Today is November 14th. It's the day before we get the first round of voting, the 20 nominees, and I want to talk to you about my predictions. In past years, this will be my 5th year doing a video like this, whether it's the horror or the thriller category. We used to get a full month of voting and 3 different rounds, but now there's only 2 rounds and there's 19 days for me to read them all. I have read approximately 15 2022 horror releases so far. Most of them I haven't liked, and the ones that I have, I don't know that I would predict any of them in the awards. Either they're not super horror or they're not popular enough. And the goal of this video for me is to hopefully find books that are even better than those horror releases I haven't read yet. I love to see what's out there, what's getting hype, and picking up things that maybe I wouldn't on my own. From the books I've read, I could see Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin making it into the awards, just like Home by Sarah Gailey, The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, and Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. So I guess those are my first official predictions. In this stack, I've got Leech. I don't actually predict loot, but I want to read it, so I feel like I'm kind of manifesting it. We've got Mary, which I think is at the top of my predictions. Just like Mother is pretty high up there too. I feel like this will be a thing. And then maybe Sundial. The books that I feel most confident will be in there are right here though, because these are some people we've seen in the horror category or just in the Goodreads Choice Awards before in general. We've got Darcy Coates, Jennifer McMahon, Alma Katsu, Stephen King and Richard Chismar, Josh Mallerman, Andy Davidson, and Ian Reid. I would be surprised if these ones weren't in there. And then my last stack of predictions is just books that I have seen getting hype, getting attention, whether it be from the book community or featured in like Goodreads horror lists already, various articles and things. So I put the Cherry Robbers on here. I do feel like if we ever get YA in the horror category, it'll be this year for maybe The Weight of Blood or My Dearest Darkest. I've got The Devil Takes You Home and Beneath the Stairs, Such a Pretty Smile, Ghost Eaters, Road of Bones, Devil House, and The Violence. I know I'm not covering who these authors are or what the books are about because this section isn't about that. It's just so when tomorrow the 20 appear, hopefully I'm like got a 50% accuracy and I can feel good about myself. Oh, and also there's ones I haven't gotten my hands on yet. Mother Thing and Suburban Hell are 2 on my prediction list, and I'm sure there are others I'm not thinking of. My goal, as always, is to read the top 10. So we have the top 20 announced tomorrow, and then we have 2 weeks until the top 10 happen, and then there are 5 days to vote on the top 10, and then we have to wait a couple days, and then the winners get announced on December 8th. So by December 4th, at the very least, I need to have read the top 10 so I can make a fully informed vote. I will be reviewing each one with you along the way and talking about things like my overall ranking of all of them, but also rating them on things like scare factor, unsettling factor, weirdness, intrigue, and I guess I'll just see you tomorrow and we can find out together what's happening. Here we go. Our Wives Under the Sea is here. I wasn't ready for that. The Fervor by Alma Katsu, The Violence by Delilah S. Dawson. I'm so happy it's here. If you didn't watch my latest TBR decision making video, I pulled some things out of the jar. This was one of them, and I was hoping it was on this list, because if not, and I just had to read it for fun on my own time, I don't know how I would do that. Gallows Hill by Darcy Coates. Darcy Coates has a different book that came out this year, so I'm surprised to see that. What the fuck? House of Hunger is on here? I was not expecting House of Hunger to be on here. It does not have very many readers, and The Year of the Witching did not get a lot of votes, but I'm so happy it's here. Sundial by Katrina Ward, not surprised. Children on the Hill, What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I don't know why I didn't consider White Horse to be on here. The Devil Takes You Home, I know what that one is. It does say it's a thriller right there in the synopsis. We've got Gwendy's Final Task, we were just talking about. Why doesn't it say? It's part of the series. It's a trilogy. Just like Mother. I do own it. Oh my god. The Cherry Robbers, I just put on my winter TBR. I've already read Juniper and Thorn, and I've already read Manhunt, and The Hacienda I knew would be here, and I've already read it. This is going well for me. Oh, let's pause and appreciate this before I see the last four. We Spread by Ian Reid. Absolutely. Saw that coming. Hidden Pictures, everyone's been talking about, and I haven't picked it up, and I can't explain why. Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. I thought maybe, and then I didn't put it on my predictions list. Small Angels I've never heard of. A Malicious Spirit. Okay, let's assess. So looking at my predicted 30, some books you could take right off there if I remembered the fact that books have to have an average 3.6 or higher to even be considered. So we can take some off right there. They shouldn't even have been on my list. And then Leech and Dead Silence were in the sci-fi category, so that's my bad. Juniper and Thorn and House of Hunger, I didn't expect to be on there. I guess I thought of them as more fantasy, but it makes sense that they're here for sure. I also think I considered like White Horse and Hidden Pictures probably more thrillers if pressed. I had never heard of Small Angels or Gallows Hill. And then I wasn't considering Such Sharp Teeth because I guess me and Rachel don't have the best history, but this does give me a third chance to give her a try. I'm gonna pick it up because it's pink and cute. So let's swing by Indigo and Mosaic in the library and see everything that I can gather. I feel like at this point Hidden Pictures is kind of a shoo-in to win. Not only does it have the most readers, not even like nothing is even coming close, but it also has the highest average rating of any book on the entire list. I'm back from book hunting and I've successfully tracked down 18 of the 20 selections. So shout out to my local library, my local indie bookstore, and my own closet. Let's run through what I believe them to be about, not the full synopsis, but maybe just like the horror that each of them contains. For the 5 that I've already read, what a color palette. I will be reviewing these each individually later, but we've got Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, which is a haunting, slow, literary, horror, sapphic love story, and its horror is cosmic in nature. We have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher and contains horror where a certain menacing fungus is taking over the plants and animals and maybe people of the manor. Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin is apocalyptic. It is about revenge and it has a trans cast of characters. It's about survival. The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas is a gothic horror about the ghost of a dead woman haunting a manor. And Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid is a fairy tale horror about a family of witches. The next 5 are books that I probably would have picked up on my own or did pick up on my own. House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson follows a young woman who becomes a blood maid for high society. White Horse by Erica T. Worth is about a young woman who lost her mother and is now seeing visions of that death and perhaps a monstrous creature. The Cherry Robbers by Saray Walker is about a family who every single sister dies right after she gets married and one sister who wants to break the curse. We Spread by Ian Reid is about an elderly woman moving into a care facility and starting to lose grip on reality. And Sundial by Katrina Ward has a very vague synopsis about a woman and her daughter starting to have the same like weird abilities that she did as a child. 5 books that I knew about but probably wouldn't consider if not for this specific challenge include Just Like Mother by Anne Heltzel, which has to do with fertility and cults. Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison is about a woman who hits a werewolf with her car and then gets bitten and turns into a werewolf herself. The Violence by Delilah S. Dawson is about a pandemic where people are overcome with fits of extreme violence. Gwendy's Final Task by Stephen King and Richard Chismar is the 3rd book in the Gwendy's Button Box series. In the first one, you're following Gwendy as a child who's gifted with this box, and in this one, she's trying to keep that box away from weird forces, and so I think she goes to space. And Hidden Pictures by Jason Brekulik is about a young boy who starts drawing these horrifying pictures. Somebody or something is taking over his mind and confessing to these murders. And then the 5 books I never would have heard of if not for the Goodreads Choice Awards, or would never have picked them up if not for this scenario. The Children on the Hill by Jennifer McMahon, which is historical horror about this sibling group and monster hunting. The Fervor by Alma Katsu is another historical horror that takes place in Japanese internment camps. And features a spider demon. The Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias is about 3 desperate men on a road trip hijacking a drug cartel before it reaches Mexico. Gallows Hill by Darcy Coates seems to be a paranormal haunted house story, and Small Angel seems to be a haunted church story, both following women returning to their small town. A lot of them sound like they're a real mix of genres or claim to be genre bending. If I were to organize it as far as my interest level, it would look like this. There are a couple at the top that I very much am interested in reading, followed by some that I'm down to pick up. The ones following children I'm usually less interested in, and then I don't know, these ones are at the bottom. I'm not going to read them in this order though, because my goal is to read the top 10, so I need to read some that I feel like will be in the top 10 because there's not a lot of time, but I also feel like prioritizing ones that I just paid full price for. So without further ado, let's get into the reading and the reviews. Today I'm filming an Instagram Controls My Life for my channel that I do every November, and in it I usually end up reading one of the nominees for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and today is no different. I had the people vote on what I should read today, and they did select one of the nominees. So such sharp teeth is happening today. We're following Rory, who's currently living with her twin sister while she gets ready to give birth, and she is dealing with obviously slowly transforming into a werewolf, or that's what she comes to understand is happening to her after she's doing some research, and she got bit by something after she hit it with her car, and then her wounds healed really quickly and she seems to have this craving for meat. I like the idea of this type of story. I've read things like Night Bitch and The Vegetarian and various stories of kind of unhinged women, but there's a bigger conversation going on about female rage and feminism, independence, and the ways that the world views women. And it's not just with her like not being able to handle her emotions as this creature that she's embodying a little bit, but it's also a reflection of trauma that she's endured and how different people in her life have responded to her sharing the story of her trauma. There's a lot of relationships we're reading about. There is a guy that she's getting involved with, and how she needs to keep this from him, the secret that she has, her relationship with her twin sister and how different they are. At this point for me, like, intrigue is at a 3. There's a lot of interesting things that we're talking about. I think this book has good things to say. I most definitely understand the purpose of this book and what it can do for people. I don't like Rachel Harrison's writing, even while she's talking about things that I appreciate her talking about. So that's where I'm at with it right now. I'm gonna finish filming this video, and then at the end of the day, I will let you know my final thoughts. If I were to go back and rewatch my Goodreads video from last year, I feel like what I'm gonna say about this is the same as what I said about this, which is that it's not my brand of horror, but I'm glad it exists because there are so many people that I can recommend like cozy horror to. Though I did enjoy this a little more than I expected. I think this was a 2. This one is gonna land at a 3. I think a lot of the concepts outside of becoming a werewolf are gonna be relatable for people. Finding your place in the world, like connecting with your family, feeling like you need a fresh start, starting a new relationship, and feeling like there's parts of your personality that you need to keep to yourself, and vulnerability is hard, and everybody has things that they don't want to share with each other, and I feel like that's just all a big metaphor in here with her hiding her werewolf identity. And the coziness of it comes from the tight-knit community, the small town vibes, the friendship and relationship that you're freshly starting. This book had a lot of good things to say, but I didn't like enjoy myself, and I didn't get what I'm looking for out of a horror novel. I would give it a 0 for the scare factor, a 0 for the unsettling factor. Like, I know it's werewolves, but it's barely werewolves. And maybe that's why I got a 3 instead of a 2, because like the shape-shifting element and like the transformation wasn't that much of a part of the story, which is where paranormal things lose me. I'll give it a 2 for weirdness, because it's werewolves. Like the rest of the books that I'm reading for this video, are there any that are just realistic horror, just slashers? I don't really know, but then that would get a 0 for weirdness, essentially. Overall, it was just okay. Now, give me a title card for the violence, because I've started it. So the violence starts out at the very beginning of this new epidemic, and I think it's gonna follow like as the world descends into chaos. Right now we're following 3 main perspectives, and they're all part of a family. So there's a young woman, a teenager, her mother, and then her mother. Each one of them has difficult relationships with men. I only just realized this is the silhouette the profile of a man's face, and it is about real life violence and things that these people are dealing with. But then also there is this illness where people are overcome with this unexpected violence. They can't control it, and it doesn't stop until they like murder somebody. And it's interesting because at this point in the book, it's kind of about how at least one of the women is taking advantage of the violence to enact some revenge, let's say. And it's an interesting thing that's going on. It's definitely higher for intrigue than I expected. I'm just interested to see if it can keep this momentum for 500 pages. Halfway through the violence and it's going fine. I find all three characters we're following relatively compelling. They have things they need to work through, but they also have a lot of trauma to recover from. When I originally heard of this book, I thought its comp titles were going to be like The Loop and The Power, which I gave both 3 stars. And I do feel like it is having a lot of the same conversations. But I would also throw Station 11 into the mix. As somebody who likes post-apocalyptic stories following a bunch of people, seeing where their lives diverge and come back together, it's intriguing. And it's also thrown in a very weird performance element that I was not expecting, and I don't know how to feel about. It's just interesting where this family ends up after they get split apart. As expected, it's very much about the cycles of abuse, and that is horror within itself. There is graphic depictions of violence against humans and animals, and there is most definitely a sense of dread, not knowing what's going to happen to these people or if they're going to get back into the abusive situation that they've been in. So for that, it's more unsettling than scary. For the characters themselves trying to survive, obviously it's terrifying, but not as a reader. I'm already gonna give it a 0 for the scare factor. It's more about personal development, life choices, reflecting on things that they've done and seen and how it's impacted their children, how it's impacted themselves, and how they're going to move forward in life. This pandemic is very much front and center in its own right, but also very frequently references COVID-19 and how it's informed how humanity is going to deal with the violence. Me again, much later in the day. Let me move this lamp. Let's at least try. Is that better lighting? I don't know. I finished the violence. I'm sick of having this opinion that this book did nothing wrong, but I didn't like it. I'm giving it 3 stars. I see how this book could be extremely cathartic for people and how this is such a personal story as per the author's note regarding abuse survivors and domestic violence. I feel like I've already talked about all the themes present in here. I am giving it a 0 for the scare factor, a 1 for unsettling. For weirdness, the pandemic itself is definitely unique, but I'm gonna give it a 1 just because it very much is in the real world and has a real world vibe. It doesn't really go large scope as far as how the violence is affecting the world. Intrigue is hard to rate because was I intrigued by the book's premise and what set off the chain of events? For sure, I wanted to know where things were going. The other question of intrigue though is, did it live up to its intrigue? And I don't think that it did. So I guess I'm gonna settle it like a 2.5. I just didn't expect it to stay as insular as it did. This was a great story about resilience and strength and overcoming so many obstacles in life, and I wouldn't be surprised if this makes the top 10 because so many people are saying so many good things about it, so I'm glad that I read it early. I tried to resist. I tried to put it off for a little bit longer, but I cannot wait to read House of Hunger. As somebody claiming to be in her vampire era and who chose this as the book club selection of the month, like, I can't hold off. And I'm so glad I started reading this. I am 50 pages in. I've seen this referred to more so as vampire adjacent. So the political, social system has been set up for us in these first 50 pages. We have Marion. She lives in the slums of the South, and we're being told about the history of the North versus the South and where money has been, where the nobles have been, how power has been exchanged. And there used to be all of these really powerful houses in the North. I think there was like 28 of them. Now there's only 4. House of Hunger, House of Fog, House of Locusts, and House of Mirrors. And there is this idea that blood heals people. So all of the rich, powerful people, they hire blood maids who in the South you're seen as like giving up all morality to be a part of that. But in the North where they hire the blood maids, they the rumor is that they treat them very kindly, they're very important to them, and after you commit your time to being a blood maid, you will have all of these riches afterwards. So she responds to this ad seeking a blood maid. She goes and meets with like a headhunter essentially, who approves her and is like, your blood tastes incredible, let's go up north together. And this is what I love about Gothic stories. I don't always give Gothic stories the highest ratings, but the whole setup, like if it's going to take place in a house or on a property, I love the getting there journey to be really described and atmospheric. I'll give you some examples. There's like the Hacienda, Mexican Gothic came to mind, The Death of Jane Lawrence, and Just Like Home. Even though I didn't love these books, the initial like introduction to the house itself, it's so good. And that's what I need out of a story like this, and what I'm getting. At the 50-page mark, we are on the train. All the people are getting descriptions, the food they're eating, what they're like driving past. I adore the writing so far. I'm super intrigued, so I'm excited to be reading it. I have finished my read of House of Hunger. I'm so excited to build the discussion for this for the book club live show. My final rating is a 4.5, which actually puts it in like the top 10 of all of my book club selections ever. And as far as the rankings, I feel like I would give it a 1 for the scare factor and a 2 for unsettling, but that's not like a diss to the book. That is the intended vibe of it. What actually moves the plot along is there's a kind of mystery going on within the estate, and also the mystery of like, is this job everything that Marion believes it to be? Spoilers, it's not. Since you're only understanding things as she does throughout the story, that's why it doesn't give the paranormal vibes. The setup is more vampire adjacent because it's based on like the real Countess Elizabeth Bathory. So it's about the class discrepancies and the exploitative practices of using these young women and their blood for rejuvenation purposes, more so than like a creature horror. And what made it most compelling for me is the sapphic relationships we're following, the kind of competition of becoming the top blood maid, and also the claustrophobic vibe that this has. So intrigue for me is a 4, and weirdness, I would have to leave it at like a 1 or a 2, just because I don't think it brings anything new to this concept as far as the weirdness. It brings a lot to it as far as just being from a new author, bringing diversity, bringing in new conversations, but the weirdness is not new. And I wasn't unsettled, but I think like all the blood conversations could be unsettling for people for sure. So this is my current ranking. I'm going to check in every, I guess, 3 books. So here's where I'm putting Such Sharp Teeth, and then The Violence, and then House of Hunger is near the top, but I'm still leaving some room for hopefully bigger wins to come. As much as I want to prioritize the books at the top of the stack of my interest level, I just realized it's only a couple of days until the top 10 are announced, and I need to start reading what I actually think is going to be in the top 10. So before that happens, I want to make sure I read Children on the Hill and Gwendy's Final Task. Since my ultimate goal is to be able to vote in the top 10, which is only like live for 4 days, I only have 4 days to read everything that I have yet to read. So 50 pages into the Children on the Hill, I have a good idea of what's going on. There is a mix of storytelling styles in here. In one timeline in the 70s, we're following a sibling duo, and then becomes kind of a trio because their grandmother is a doctor. These children have no real memories of their parents, and their grandma helps people with mental illnesses, and there's also an inn where she lets them live. And one of the people she ends up bringing into her own home, and that is a child. She doesn't speak, she has no memories of her past, and so we have this trio who is doing like monster hunting activities. And then we also have little excerpts of the Book of Monsters itself that these children are writing together, accompanied by articles written by various people about the inn itself, investigations about these infamous children. And then finally we have the 2019 storyline, which is from Lizzie. Now she is going back to the town. She runs a podcast and she's also monster hunting. So obviously we're meant to believe that she is one of the children who's part of this sibling group, though she's going by a different name. I listened to the first 50 pages while I was Christmas shopping, so the audiobook is good. Historical, kind of vague ghost stories, which is what Jennifer McMahon is known for and people love. I don't know if it's my favorite, but I have an open mind continuing on. My final rating for the Children on the Hill is, I think, the same rating I gave this author in this same video concept last year, which is a 3. I'm going to continue to create random categories that I don't need to for these things. This is not cozy horror. This one is gentle horror. Though Jennifer McMahon's books throw in a lot of different elements, there's various storylines and timelines going on, you are essentially following one woman the entire time, and it feels very low risk. The scenarios she finds herself in are never exceptionally dangerous or adventurous. It's a slow gathering of research and understanding. What's keeping the narrative moving in at least the present day storyline is there is a missing girl, and our main character, Lizzie Shelley, this has a big nod to Frankenstein. She's been using her podcast to track all of these missing girls to hopefully find a monster slash her sister. All of that is in the synopsis, and once I hit about 100 pages in, I knew exactly how the story was going to go. It was very predictable, so intrigue, I'm gonna have to give it a 2 because the things that I was considering, they did pan out, and I got to learn various things going on within the plot. Scare factor is a 0. Unsettling is probably a 1. Since we're dealing with the medical field, there is some talk of body parts and jars of animal organs and that type of thing. There's this basement that people aren't allowed to go into, and people might disagree with me, but I'm gonna have to give weirdness a 1. And something that I'm realizing within this is we all obviously have different tastes in horror, and the Goodreads Choice Awards, it's the perfect representation of popular horror that has mass appeal, and like that is the point of it. So there's not going to be a lot of things that are completely outside the box, because then they wouldn't end up in the awards. So while I was reading this, I was like, I would recommend this to fans of general fiction. I feel like fans of literary fiction could pick this up, historical fiction. Even if you've only read YA, I feel like this would be a good transition into adult books. And that's how I feel about so many of these books that I've read, is they're very approachable, and that's cool. However, it doesn't mean they're often going to be big wins for me. Again, respect what this book did. Love the conversations it brought up. For me, it was good. Okay, hello. I had a hair appointment this morning, and I got 50 pages into Gwendy's final task. I feel like the first 50 pages set up the story really well. It kind of recapped the first 2 books because it's Gwendy's first 2 experiences with this box, which is just this mysterious box with buttons on it, and bad things will happen if you push the buttons, but maybe good things will happen if you push the buttons. I gave the first book in the series 5 stars, but it didn't really leave a lasting impression on me, which is how I feel about most Stephen Kings, so I never plan to continue in the series. I didn't read the second book. Anyway, it summed it up quickly and easily, and now we understand why she has encountered the box for the 3rd time as like a 60-year-old woman, and what she's being asked to do. Also, in those first 9 chapters, we got the takeoff to space. She's one of a small crew going up to space to do some type of task. She has a job to do, but also she's going to like put the box in space, I guess. And the rest of those pages was spent explaining the political climate, how she ended up as a senator, why she's in politics. It's an interesting enough setup that I will continue. I think it'll be a quick read, and hopefully I'll give you my review pretty soon here. All right, let's get this over with so I can look at the top 10 because it has been announced. This was a 3. Everything's a 3. Okay, not everything, but too many for me to feel happy about. Here is my current ranking. I'm starting to think I'm not gonna have anything up at the top, but I'm still leaving that space in hopes that it happens. This definitely felt more sci-fi than horror, but I understand the button box itself. There is a certain amount of weirdness that's gonna make me give it a 2 that makes it fit in the horror category, but I didn't feel any unsettling or scariness at all, ever, at any point. Gwendy's a fine character to follow. You're really in her head. You get to know her. She's dealing with memory loss, and so a lot of the book, beyond the descriptions of being in space and how the spacecraft works and all of their jobs and their suits and the little door locker that they keep the suits in, and the little box described that she keeps the button box inside of to keep it away from everybody. All of those exhaustive descriptions. We then get an equal amount of description about Gwendy and her memory. So her coming to terms with maybe having Alzheimer's, dementia, and she goes through various like sequences in her head, different like brain games to try to remember certain words that she's forgotten. She keeps a journal and a laptop with her that are frequently going missing. Are people taking it, or is she misplacing it, where she keeps all of her like secrets about her mind because they wouldn't let her into space if they knew that she was having memory troubles. So I feel like that's what took up 2/3 of the story, was the descriptions of the space technology and Gwendy's mind. And then the third chunk was politics. This is definitely not an escapist type of book, as Gwendy is a figure in politics. She has a lot of opinions on people, presidents, COVID. So there's just a lot of discussion of where COVID came from, how the country handled it. As somebody who's not American, the political conversations hold no interest for me, but I definitely wasn't bothered by it the way that a lot of reviewers seem to be. So I guess it's gonna have to get a 1 for intrigue, because I was interested enough to understand the end of Gwendy's journey with this box, and we got the end of Gwendy's journey with the box, but it was the exact ending that I feel like you're expecting. And if you're a big Stephen King fan, there's definitely integrations of Dark Tower references, It references, we've got Castle Rock, we've got Derry, so it definitely feels like a nostalgic read. I didn't enjoy myself. As far as a 3, this is pretty low on the 3 scale. Maybe we could call it a 2.75 if pressed. I would probably recommend people just read the first one on its own and just keep it to that. Now let's look at the top 10, and maybe I should predict the top 10. These are the 8 books with the highest readership, so I feel like that automatically makes them more likely to end up in the top 10. Side note, I got myself an on sale copy of Hidden Pictures, so I'm sure I'll be reading that in the days to come. I think I feel good about these 8. I'm gonna throw my guesses at these 2, We Spread and Juniper and Thorn, because even if you haven't read any other horror, this you have likely picked up this year just because it's popular with other groups, and We Spread just because it's Ian Reid. All right, now let's see how accurate I am. Gwendy's Final Task, just read that, perfect. Children on the Hill, just read that. Hidden Pictures, oh, House of Hunger. Okay, I didn't expect that one to be in the top 10, but I read it. Just Like Mother. Okay, What Moves the Dead, perfect. Juniper and Thorn, awesome. Oh, The Violence. Okay, and The Hacienda, which I read, and Our Wives Under the Sea, which I read. Oh my gosh, there's only two in this top 10 that I haven't read yet. And I have a couple days left until voting closes, and I have no doubt that I'll be able to get through these. Amazing. That could not have gone better. I actually read the first chapter, which is 20 pages of Just Like Mother, a couple months ago when I was trying to decide between a couple different books for a video, and now I just reread that and I'm 50 pages in. Things are moving very quickly. We've gotten the initial setup and she's already spending time with her cousin. So Maeve and her cousin Andrea grew up together in this cult, and something has separated them, and now they've spent time trying to find each other again. So we're from Maeve's perspective, and Andrea has finally reached back out to her, and they're gonna spend some time together on this weekend getaway. As soon as she gets there, things are already a little bit weird. Andrea's friends are strange. They have these baby dolls that they treat like real babies. It's making her uncomfortable. Maeve has no interest in having children. She has expressed that, and that's not very welcome to those who work within this company called New Life. For me, a lot of cult stories tell the same story. They have they hit the same points, so that's probably why it didn't intrigue me initially, but I've seen so many good reviews from my friends. The publisher kindly sent me a copy earlier this year. It does bring in some different conversations and unique things as far as the fertility stuff of it all, though pregnancy doesn't often interest me either. I think the writing is good, but I just think it's going to be the exact story I'm expecting, so I'll let you know if I was right in a second. Are you ready to be absolutely shocked by my rating? It was 3 stars. They're all 3 stars. If you're looking for an interesting book club pick, I would probably recommend this one. Maeve and Andrea have very clearly defined roles within the story. Maeve is naive, apprehensive, but excited about this relationship that she's building. Then the things that get asked of her, and as her life begins to spiral. I would say it was all very expected, but it could lead to some great conversations about society's obsession with having children, obsession with other people having children, the expectation to have children, the loss of identity that comes along with it sometimes, the desperation for this perfect family unit. So it was the exact story I was expecting, the exact conversations regarding autonomy and personal choices that I was expecting. Obviously, a lot of books are written as, a critique of culture. They're intended for the author to be able to take their pain and frustration with various societal structures, systems, and laws and channel that into art. That's always been a thing, but I'm really seeing it more and more in the horror genre lately. I have mixed feelings about the ending because on one hand, I respect that of all the books that I've read, this is one of the only ones that committed to the horror through to the end. However, I do feel like some of the critiques that this book was making, it almost felt like it was going back on some of its stances with how things were developing in the final third especially. I give it a 1 for scare, I give it a 3 for unsettling, probably a 1 for weirdness just because it's a little too real, and a safe 2 for intrigue. Definitely not the worst culty book I've read. Today's the day for hidden pictures. It's also the final day of voting, so I need to finish this by the end of the day. So far, it's been a very quick read. The integration of doodles from this young child, it's ominous, even though I don't think I've gotten to the spookiness of it yet. But the setup is we have Mallory, who is recovering from a drug addiction, and she's looking for an opportunity. She's not a lot of people are willing to give her one, but there's this family who has a 5-year-old son who they need a nanny for. She's gonna live on the premises in their like little pool house shed that's been converted into a cottage for her to live, and something bad happened in that little house way back in the day. Since she's really grateful for this opportunity, she's weary about messing anything up, so she's trying to be nice and perfect and appeasing, but their child is drawing very disturbing images regarding his imaginary friend, and Mallory suspects that there's more going on. She believes in like spirits and maybe ghosts, and as the images he draws starts to get more detailed and more unlike something a 5-year-old would be capable of drawing, she's more and more convinced and starts to like investigate things that have happened in the town. I'm intrigued enough to continue. I'm more intrigued by Mallory's backstory. I wonder if we're going to learn more about what happened to her, what happened to her family, how she ended up in the situation she ended up in, if there's anything she's keeping from us. So I'm going to keep reading. The good news, I've read 12 of the 20 now. The bad news, ooh, I didn't like it. This is my least favorite of all of the 20. I didn't see that coming. I'm giving it a 2-star. The first 50 pages were interesting. It was kind of like Goosebumps for adults. There was the weird neighbor with the Ouija board. There was the local boy with the big heart who just wanted to help work on the case with her. There was creepy sounds inside this small cabin, ominous notes, some after-school special dialogue. There were so many different things going on, various reveals. It got very messy. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with my scare rating and my unsettling rating. I just expected it to be far scarier and spookier considering the high rating that this has. For weirdness, I'm going to give it a 2. There are some odd concepts in here, though the weirdest thing to me is the weird takes on everything from race to religion, on fatness, on gardeners, on trans people. There are a lot of opinions put forth in this book that I would like to associate with the characters. I don't have to love characters' opinions to like a book. I'd like to associate it with them more so than the book having these opinions or the author having these opinions. And I can easily surmise these perspectives shared throughout the story as being from ignorant, privileged perspectives of people in this neighborhood who don't realize that they're coming from a place of ignorance and privilege. However, because these things go unchecked within the text and paired with the not so subtle references that these things should remain unchecked, it left me with some very icky feelings. I want my icky feelings in a horror to come from the gore, not the hate-filled rhetoric. What my reading really comes down to is paired with intrigue, which is so low because the first 50 pages and the last 50 pages, if you read just that, it would be the same story. I just was not enjoying myself enough throughout the story. And now it's time to vote. I've officially read all of the top 10. My favorite, my true favorite horror of the year didn't even end up here. So what does this vote really matter? Let's do it. And we're gonna click on the less superior cover for Our Eyes Under the Sea. So here's where my ranking lies right now, and I have all the time in the world to just continue on with however many more nominees I want to read. But first I am going to briefly review the 5 that I've already read that I just voted for too. I should talk about them. Okay, let's cover these 5 that I read before the video began. The one that I read the longest ago was Manhunt. It is pretty low on my ranking, and that's not for a lack of successfully delivering what the book is. Splatterpunk and this mix of erotica and graphic depictions of violence sometimes isn't my favorite. It's set in the future, there's a virus, it's following a group of badass trans women taking down these feral men slash beasts. I would give it like a 4 personally for unsettling. Probably a 1 for the scare factor, 3 for weirdness, and 2 for intrigue because I think the world setup is interesting, and then it just kind of lost me. I didn't find the pace and perspectives and speed of the book to be easy to follow, though it accomplished what it set out to do. It was complete chaos, especially in the latter half. Now, What Moves the Dead, I find that T. Kingfisher really accomplishes this mix of gothic vibes with quirky characters really well. Though it's a retelling and it follows the origin story pretty well, there's definitely an integration of more grotesque scenes, more explanation behind certain things that are left as a question mark in the Poe story. These two books combined really make up like Mexican Gothic. So I would give this one probably a 3 for weirdness, a 0 for scares, probably a 3 for unsettling, especially if you have issue with like body horror and fungal growths. And I just changed my mind because I remembered some of the scenes in here to do with animals, and I'm going to give it a 2 for the scare factor. And for intrigue, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to give it pretty low. This one was a 4 for me overall because I respect so much about it and I just generally love short horror. I was interested in the book itself as a retelling than I was the story once I got into the story. But that's probably because I already knew what was gonna happen, and everything from the cover to the synopsis gives you the full description of the story and somebody coming to this house and their friend being ill and then all of these fungal growths around. The Hacienda, on the other hand, is super high for intrigue because I love stories about a marriage of convenience and I really wanted to know what was happening in this manor. I was interested in this man's late wife. I was interested in the relationship that was building between the main character and the priest. Weirdness is gonna be a 2 maybe because it has ghosty vibes. I wasn't particularly scared or unsettled by much of what was going on, so I'll give it a 1 for both of those. Then these two, which go beautifully together. Juniper and Thorn was a 2.5 for me, but I understand how this does so much for so many people. When you're talking about abuse and exploitation, there's a lot of confronting of trauma in here following these witchy sisters and their awful father, and then a romantic relationship that blooms. I just didn't enjoy the coherency of the plot. I didn't enjoy the relationship that happened, how much of the book it took up. The graphic descriptions are gonna land it at a 3 for me for unsettling. It was uncomfortable to read for a good amount. Probably a 0 for the scare factor as a reader. Maybe a 1 for weirdness, and a 2 for intrigue. When it comes to fairy tale stories, you often know what to expect from it. I think it's very clear with its intent. It has a lot of messages that are obvious takeaways for the reader to get. And on the flip side, Our I Was Under the Sea is a lot of nuanced kind of metaphorical things. It's very slow, it has low plot and stunning writing. I'm giving it a 5 for intrigue because I was just so fascinated at visiting this woman's chapters where she was underwater in a submarine after the initial mission that this crew was on got extended. It also gets a 3 for unsettling because of those scenes, though I fully recognize that it might be because I literally read this while on a leaking boat on the ocean. It was a little spooky, but it also gets a 0 for the scare factor, and maybe a 1 for weirdness because the vibes feel a little weird, but I don't want to set anyone up for the idea that this gets wild by the end. There's a lot of things that it's subtly saying about connection and feeling like distant from your spouse and how people change over time. This one is more of a physical representation because her wife is going through something weird. She's trapping herself in the bathroom, filling the bathtub full of water and just spending all day in there. It's about depression. It's about memories. It's just my favorite. It's my favorite. Now what I'm about to do today is read We Spread. As expected, much like I Was Under the Sea, one of my favorites from last year, Cover Me With Apples, We Spread doesn't kick off in a way that feels like it's going to be undeniably horror. It's slow, it's very inner monologue heavy, it doesn't seem like anything objectively scary is happening or is going to happen. But that's my favorite type of horror, when it leads you in a very gentle way. It's like the book is holding your hand. The atmosphere is one of everything is absolutely fine. Let me guide you over here. Look how nice everything is. Don't look behind that door. And this sense of unease is building, and I love it. It kind of reminds me of the tone of Death in Her Hands by Ottessa Moshfegh. We're following an older woman. She's reflecting on a lot of things and sharing a lot of factual information. She's very confident in herself, but she feels like maybe she should be questioning her memory more than she actually is. So we have Penny, who at the beginning of the book is whisked away to a care facility. It's very small. There's only a couple other seniors there with her. She doesn't really know why she's there. She doesn't know why this is the place that's been selected for her, but people are telling her like this is the place that she chose. She vetted them. She is just gonna love it here. We're all so wonderful and welcoming, and your life here is gonna be so beautiful. Don't worry about anything. We're gonna take care of you. And it took until the halfway point. This is a very fast read. Like, well, don't read anything on this page, but look how spaced everything is. That's how the dialogue reads, and even her internal thoughts. They're much of the book, most of the book, but they are very brief thoughts. So it took until the halfway point until I started to understand what's really going on, and it's starting to feel sinister. And everything about it, the title, the cover, is starting to make sense. This is me turning on my camera immediately after finishing We Spread, so I don't have to be confronted by my own emotions, so I don't end up bawling my absolute eyes out. It's avoidance, so I'll talk to you instead. 5 stars. This is so painful. Plot-wise, I don't even know what to cover here. It's a woman living in this home, connecting with the people, being taken care of, or is she? This book is about so many things, but doesn't commit to just one thing. I think there's so many takeaways, but there's also so much interpretation that you get to have. There's this big question of, can this woman trust herself? And is her paranoia justified? The book itself gives very much Lakewood and Catherine House kind of vibes, with fear being a big factor and not knowing if the place that you live, the place that you spend time, these trusted professionals, if they're actually taking care of you. We frequently revisit the idea of her leaving all of these items behind and trying to remember what she brought with her, how she even got here. She has lost so many memories, and like, is it because she is old, or is it because the people are doing something to her? But that is something that happens in senior homes when, you know, Alzheimer's comes into play, various other things, when you start to see things and you interpret them as something else, and you start to feel anger, you start to feel unsafe. There's a lot of like emotions at play, obviously. As somebody who lost my favorite person in the world, watched my favorite person go through Alzheimer's, and having to literally like lock her in her own home so she couldn't just leave in the middle of the night, I don't want to read subject matter like this. I don't pick up a lot like this because it's hard to read. The way that this book just so subtly touches on all of these things, it's being confronted with a lot of people's biggest fear, which is not being able to trust yourself, having a loss of independence. The book is a little bit cyclical. It's a little bit self-referential, which I always enjoy. I'm giving it a 5 for unsettling. I just am. Traditionally, scary scenes are not present. I'm actually not going to rate it on weirdness. This is the first time I think I'm ever doing this, but I almost feel like my ranking of weirdness would give away what the book actually is. And intrigue, I guess I'm putting at a 4, because I think the conversations that are brought up are very interesting. There's all of this conversation about the physical items that she left behind, and like there's all this metaphor for leaving behind memories, and who are you once you're separated from everything you've ever known. And it's now surpassed everything in the ranking, so it wasn't in the top 10, so it's not like this affects my final vote, but of all the 20 nominees, this is currently my favorite. Hello, good morning. I'm just getting ready for the day, and I thought I would update you on White Horse because I'm more than halfway through it and I feel like I'm about to finish it today. I've picked it up and put it down probably 7 times, and before I actually finish it, I should probably tell you what I'm thinking, which is very little because I find it uninteresting as far as the actual horror of it goes, because that hasn't really been introduced. Besides our main character seeing some maybe visions occasionally, it feels more just like a contemporary kind of mystery story. So far it reminds me a bit of Empire of Wild by Sherry DeMolane and This Thing Between Us by Gus Marino as far as pace, but this one, like halfway through, it really takes off, and I'm hoping that this does that soon. The book kicks off with our main character, Carrie, hanging out at the White Horse, which is a bar that she's considering buying. And she's kind of looking at making a change in her life. She's struggling a little bit. She's lost her mother. Her father was recently in a car crash and he's now disabled and he can't help her figure out what happened. She gets gifted a bracelet that belonged to her mother, and she's kind of seeing some maybe apparitions. But the book is very much focused on her trying to figure out what happened to her mom. And it has this kind of mystery detective-y plot line that I don't like, where somebody has all the answers to her question and she knows that person has all the answers and we know that person has all the answers, but every time they meet up, the person goes, I wish I could tell you, but I can't. Like, I'm keeping this big secret and I can't tell you. I promised I would never reveal this person's secrets. And I think that's fine as a kickoff, but for that to still be happening almost 200 pages into a 300-page book, I don't know. Actually, that's not even the majority of the story. The majority of the story is how much she hates her best friend's husband. He's just a shitty guy. He's threatening to take her kids away from her. He wasn't even like at the hospital when they were born. He's trying to keep her away from Carrie. And unfortunately, I feel like that's something that a lot of women can relate to. Their best friend being in a terrible relationship and you telling them to get out of it, but they can't or they won't. And that's a really hard position to be in, wanting to support your friend, but just like being there waiting for her to make the decision or have the ability to get out of her bad circumstances, but listening to her just rant about this man for the majority of the story is really exhausting to read. And then the third part that's taking up most of it is she has this friend who recently died, and there's a lot of grief associated with that and like survivor's guilt. That's why I would say it's reminding me a bit of this, like the focus on grief. But we don't know this person. We're not getting flashbacks or anything. So it's just her navigating her own feelings, but talking about this person a lot. So those are the three things going on in here. You could argue obviously that those things are all horrifying, but the horror I expected to be in here isn't, but it could definitely kick off with something soon. So let's see how that goes. Since it took me a whole another 2 days to finish those 100 and something pages, I think my rating will make sense at a 2, and I'm just really disappointed. I like the idea of a book that's following an older character, not elderly. She's in her 30s. What I mean is a lot of books follow like a 20-year-old protagonist, very early 20s even. I also like following a character who's like a metalhead and the music she was interested in. She was a big Stephen King fan. She spent time like at the Stanley Hotel. This is a big ode to Stephen King in a lot of ways, and she spent a lot of time there and nothing really came of it. There were so many things introduced that just didn't really go anywhere. Instead, what we were reading was the same scene repeated over and over again, like her fighting with her cousin, her trying to get information and the person that has the information saying, I can't give it to you, her smoking, her talking about getting the bar. I don't know that I would say this book is flawed in any way. It's just not the story I was expecting to read. I would put it in a mystery, then paranormal, then horror category, though I'm giving it a 0 for the scare factor. Also a 0 for unsettling, just because, like I've said before, I don't think that's what this was trying to do. So that's not like an insult. Maybe it is, but ranking for weirdness makes me uncomfortable because when you take into account like cultural creatures and monsters and myths and folklore, like referring to something like that as weird is what's weird to me. But there wasn't very much of that in here, so I would rank it pretty low for that personally. And then intrigue, like I wasn't going into this hoping for a mystery to be the #1 plot, like a real life mystery, I mean. So once I knew that that was the plot, intrigue was low. I mean, it took me so long to finish this. I was intrigued by the ghosty situation, which wasn't even really part of the book. As this author and character are Indigenous, I think the conversation around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is something that I appreciate like being brought up. An important topic more people need to talk about, especially when we're following a character whose mother, like she doesn't really know what happened to her. There are conversations that come into play regarding her and other people in the community. There are obviously things that a lot of people are appreciating about this. I think certain family dynamics being explored and friendship revelations, you know, just following a woman who is very strong-willed, knows what she wants, and will do anything to get the answers. Like that is an enjoyable perspective to read from. Some of the atmosphere was good for me. I might pick up this author again. My first impression of the Cherry Robbers is how incredibly dense it is. I've got to the halfway point yesterday and the chapters, like there's no breaks, there's no blank pages. It is just paragraph, paragraph, paragraph. It just keeps moving at a very brisk pace, yet not much has even happened halfway through. We have all of these sisters who are dying, but we've only had 1 death so far. But we spent this time establishing all of the characters, the sisters, and their relationship dynamics. So our one main character, did I forget her name? Yes, it's Iris. The reason I forgot is because there's also a timeline in the future. This is set majority in the 50s, but then when she is an adult, she has like a secret identity as Sylvia, and journalists are starting to make the connection, thinking that she's Iris, thinking that she knows about this family because there are secrets revolving around it and what happened. So they're trying to get her to tell her like life story. I feel like this would probably appeal to fans of the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Definitely not that similar. Like there's a whole fairy tale quality to this, and I wouldn't call it horror, but it is giving similar vibes to Juniper and Thorn. I ended up pretty pleasantly surprised by this. I'm gonna give it like a 4.25, which just slides in nicely to a slot I left. There is still one open position, and obviously I can rearrange these wherever I want. I think I am gonna give Sundial a try today because I read the first chapter of the remaining 5 books that I have, and that one intrigues me most still. So this, what did I write down? I said 0 for scary, 1 for unsettling, though it's more like conceptually unsettling more so than any actual feelings that the story evokes, the writing itself. A 2 for weirdness, and a 3 for intrigue, because I did want to know what was going on. It had a lot of things to say. It had a lot of things left for you to kind of interpret. I don't feel like this is going to be a really satisfying read for some people. It leaves me with thinking about things like, if you know that all of your many sisters have died the same way, choosing to continue to engage in a relationship yourself after that, is it more like a desperation for love no matter the cost? Or is it self-sabotage in a way, and almost an allegory for suicidal ideation? I don't know. I think the category that you put this in, horror, like kind of makes sense, but in any other genre, people would be questioning it too. Like if you call this historical, would you be questioning if the time is even an important part of the story? This could take place current day, could take place in a dystopian situation. I can't talk about the plot far beyond what I've already discussed. It's about people dying. It's about choosing to be in a relationship or not. It's about the love for your sisters. It's about choosing what you want out of life. It's about loneliness. There are definitely things that keep you intrigued. There's a firearms dynasty. There's a woman who knows about the curse, but nobody believes her and they send her away. There is queer sapphic relationships, the memoir situation going on. I just really appreciated it by the end. Overall, this is one I would recommend, but not as broadly as others, especially within the horror genre. All right, today is for Sundial by Katrina Ward. I didn't love The Last House on Needless Street, but I didn't absolutely hate it. And I've just been intrigued to see what else she's doing. So I've gotten past the 50-page mark at this point, and we're following a mother. She has 2 daughters, and one of them is seemingly a little bit evil, but her husband is also shitty. So it's like, is she getting her behavior because of what she's witnessing, or is it something more sinister? So she decides to take her out to Sundial, her like family home in the middle of the desert, and we're getting both of their perspectives. And Callie, the daughter, is thinking like, my mom brought me out here to kill me. I'm interested to see where the story goes, but I just don't think I like the writing style. There's something about this like tongue-in-cheek nature of like, I know everything that's going on and I'm only gonna let you in on it a little bit by a little bit. I want to like it, and I'm expecting a big twist, so hopefully it's a good one. Okay, we're ending the video with a 3, which doesn't feel great, but I'm happy to have read it. I would definitely recommend this for fans of Katrina Ward already. If you love The Last House on Needless Street, this has such similar things. A similar ominous vibe and a slow wait to find out what's really happening. There is definitely some differences in here. I mean, we're exploring medical like research type things. I don't want to give too much away, but there's this equal discussion of like exploring past trauma. I do wish that this author would do a little more work subverting certain, especially like mental health related tropes. I don't take direct issue with what she's doing, because I actually think that these are not intended, in both this and the other book, not intended to be plot twists, but more slow reveals that let you understand the story that you're reading better by the end. I think I'm just looking for a little more intention behind certain things and just what makes an entertaining story. For how kind of short this book is, it really went on and on and on. I listened to the audiobook for some of it, and I kept feeling like it was about to wrap up and then we would get into something completely different. So that was interesting. There's a story within the story, which is historically not something that I love. There's definitely a lot of talk of abuse in here, people and animals, and for that, among other things, and just like the malicious feeling this book had, I'm gonna give it like a 4 for unsettling, probably a 1 for the scare factor. A 3 for weirdness. It's the type of book that you're gonna finish and go, what really just happened? Like, let me think about what I just read. And then maybe a 2 for intrigue, because while I didn't love these characters, I wasn't desperate to find out what was going on with them, there were definitely some conversations that came into it that made me curious enough to finish it. So I officially read 16 of the top 20. I read all of the top 10. And as far as rankings, here is my ranking versus the Goodreads actual ranking. Obviously my top pick didn't even end up in the top 10, so it's going to be pretty low on their final list, but the winner was Hidden Pictures, followed by a couple 4 stars from me, The Hacienda and What Moves the Dead. The next couple are lowly rated ones from me, and then we've got Our Wives Under the Sea and House of Hunger, which are at the top of my list. All in all, I'm glad that I did the horror category. I love picking up things that I don't know if I'm gonna like, but at the end of the day, my favorites were the ones already on my TBR, which is the same thing that happened in the thriller category, and which is why I moved on to the horror category, and now I feel comfortable moving on to another one next year. One of my takeaways is I think Goodreads needs to remove the obligatory 3.6 star rating or above, because there's a lot of more wild, gory, outside of the box horror that I'm not personally interested in, but I know the horror community at large reads and loves, but when it gets into the hands of other people, it doesn't always work for them and it leads to a low average rating. And it's not that I think those books would end up winning anyway, but they should be in the top 20 because so many people do enjoy them. And from my perspective, this is the least horror the horror category has ever felt. And that's from somebody who prefers the horror that is, you know, more literary horror, apparently. Every year I learn more about myself. I'm probably not the perfect person to be doing this type of content. So I'm gonna link down below some other people who've done the horror category because I know they're out there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.